So I just jotted this class opener in the morning. I wrote it on the board. And I wrote it so we get a better understanding of the two different forms. We actually know three forms: standard form, slope-intercept form, and function form. Function form is y by itself. It's the same thing as slope-intercept form. It's just slope-intercept has a little more detail. So let's first start with standard form. And I want to write down my standard form equation right here. We need to know that standard form is simply this: ax plus by equals, wait, the y should be black, equals c. And the detail to know on standard form is that a, b, and c are just numbers, right? A, b, c are numbers. More specifically, they are integers. Now, when I say integers, that means no fractions, no decimals, okay? No fractions, no decimals. So those are all the details about standard form. Standard form is capital AX plus capital BY equals capital C, no fractions, no decimals. And standard form equations are great to find your x and your y intercepts, okay? Because if you wanted to find the x-intercept, all you have to do is set y equal to 0. So this whole thing would disappear and you'd get a nice equation like 2x equals 4 or like 3x equals 12 or something like that. So to find the x-intercept, you set y equal to 0 and solve. Or to find the y-intercept, you set x equal to 0 and solve. So that's something that we learned last week that we need to know for Friday's test, all right? So how do you find the x-intercept? You set y equal to 0. How do you find the y-intercept? You set x equal to 0, okay? Anyways, that's standard form, and standard form is great for finding x and y-intercepts. Now, slope-intercept form, because it says do both. It says do standard form, and it also says and slope-intercept form. So slope-intercept, we'll write it right here, is y equals mx plus b. So the m is the slope, the b is the y-intercept, not the x-intercept. So slope-intercept form is great if you want to graph the line, because if it's in this form, if it says y equals mx plus b, all you have to do is go to this value on the y-axis, because it's the y-intercept, and you put a dot right there, and then you simply go up and over according to slope. If it's positive, you're going up. If it's negative, you're going down, but you're always running to the right. So y equals mx plus b is awesome when you are graphing. So down here we have a couple more questions. It says find the y-intercept of that. So based on what we just said, it is in standard form, ax plus by equals c. It's really easy to do the x and the y-intercepts when it's in standard form. So am I asking for both the x and the y? No, I'm just asking for the y-intercept. So how do we find the y-intercept? How do I find the y-int? Come on, guys, from last week. How do I find the y-intercept?
Set x equal to 0.
That's right, set x equal to 0. Okay, so that's all they're asking for. If they would say find the x and the y-intercept, then I would, okay, for the x-intercept, I set y equal to 0. For the y-intercept, I set x equal to 0. But right here, they're only asking for the y-intercept. So we're going to set x equal to 0 and solve. So here's my x. In place of x, I want to put 0. Check it out. 3 times 0 plus 6y equals 4. Yeah, you're going to get a fraction, and it's okay to get fractions, right? And that's why I put this problem or these problems up there, so we're not scared or freak out when we have fractions. Of course, 3 times 0 is 0, so you could just scratch it out. It's not there anymore. And what you really have is 6y equals 4. And of course, you divide by, let's first start by getting rid of the 6 by dividing by 6, right? If I zoom into that, I want to divide by 6 to get rid of the 6 and divide by 6. So I have y equals 4 over 6. But anytime you have a fraction as an answer, if you could reduce it, you should reduce it. So y equals reduced by 2, 2/3. Now, what did I just find? An answer to an equation? I found the y-intercept. And visually, that means that if I were to actually graph this line, if I were to graph this line on an xy plane, it would cross the y-axis, not the x, it would cross the y-axis at the value of 2/3. So let's say here's 1, here's 2, here's 3. Where's 2/3? It's not even all the way up. It's 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. So 2/3 would be right here. So if I were graphing, they're not asking us to graph. I just want to get you an understanding that, yes, you could have fractions as x-intercepts, as y-intercepts, you know, and you would plot it there. Now, that's all they're asking us to do. So I found the y-intercept, and that's what it is. Okay, let's look over here. It's the same exact equation. 3x plus 6 equals 4. 3x plus 6y equals 4. And they're asking us to rewrite this standard form equation in slope-intercept form. And slope-intercept form is getting y by itself. So what would I do first to get it y by itself? Subtract 3x to start getting y by itself. Subtract 3x. Let's rewrite it. I want to have 6y. Now, I can't really subtract 4, take away 3x. But instead of writing 4 take away 3x, I want to switch the order, because y equals mx plus b, you want the x term first. So I'm going to write negative 3x and a positive 4 at the end. So now for my final step, what would I do for my final step? Divide by 6, divide by 6, divide by 6. And yeah, none of them work out nicely. But nevertheless, you did get y by itself. Y equals negative 3 over 6. You could reduce that fraction and you'll get negative 1/2 with an x. And the 4 over 6, that's positive. You reduce it by 2 and you get 2/3. So there is your y equals mx plus b equation. Your m is negative 1/2. Your b is 2/3. So if you were to graph this line, you would be at the, how do you start graphing y equals mx plus b equations? Where do you start? How do you start graphing y equals mx plus b equations? Start with the b. What is the b? 2/3, right? So we already started over here. 2/3 is 2/3 of the way up. And then you would look at your slope. Your slope is negative 1/2, which means you're going to rise down 1, because it's negative. It's rising down 1 and over 2. So from that fraction of a point, you would rise down to this fraction of a point and then over 2. But they're not even asking us to graph. I'm just graphing it. So you guys don't have to graph. Anyways, we need to know the difference between standard form and slope-intercept form. That's coming out on the test. Also, on the 20-question test, we're going to have 3 questions that are like these guys. All right? It's going to ask you which of the following equations are linear. And this is from last week's notes. That's why I'm bringing it up again, because a lot of us forgot last week, right? Which of the following equations are linear? And then, is this one linear? 3y. Is this one linear? Is that one? So you got to first decide, or maybe none of them are linear. And if you do have a line, rewrite the equation in standard form and then state the x and y intercepts. That's exactly how 3 of the questions are going to be out of the 20. 3 out of 20 is 15%. That's a letter grade and a half. So please pay attention. It's pretty easy to do. We need to remember the details of our notes from last week. There were 3 things that would mess up lines, that would mess up equations, that would make them not lines, make them curves or some other type of graph that's not a continuous straight line. Do you guys remember what those 3 details were from last week? 2 variables multiplied together. That would mess up the line. It's no longer a straight line. And do we have any of these 2 variables? Yeah, this one right here, x times y. So b is definitely not a line. Which other one, or what other, yeah, fractions, but a very, very important detail about fractions. You cannot have, what? You can't have a denominator that's a variable, okay? So you could have fractions, absolutely, but you cannot have a x on the bottom of a fraction. You cannot have a y on the bottom of a fraction. If you do have that, that is no longer a continuous line. So far those 2 are out. Another detail that messes up equations that make them not lines. A variable with an exponent, x to the 3rd, y to the 2nd, any x or y that has an exponent on it, like right here, x to the 2nd, that's no longer a line, that's a U-shaped curve. So that's not it either. So those were the 3 details. The only one that is a line is option A. So knowing that A is a line, it says if you do have a line, could you rewrite it in standard form and then state the x and the y intercepts? What would I need to do to this to get it in standard form? Okay, notice it's not saying rewrite it in slope-intercept form. It's not saying write it in function form. Right. It's asking for standard form. And standard form is capital AX plus capital BY equals capital C. So I need to get the X and the Y on the left side of the equal sign. So here's a Y on the left side, but I need that X to be over there also. So I'm going to subtract 2X and subtract 2X. So now I'm going to rewrite my equation. I'm going to rewrite it down here. It's going to be negative 2X plus 3Y equals negative 6. Now it's in standard form. But on the multiple choice test, you're never going to see a value that's negative. For some reason, the computer just multiplies everything by -1 to make that first term positive. I don't know why it does it, but that's how it works. So our actual standard form equation is going to be positive 2X minus 3Y equals positive 6. So we have converted option A equation to a standard form equation. And then it says after that, state the X and the Y intercepts. So after that, we're going to do some work here. We're going to say X int, Y int with the squiggly line between it. And to find the X intercept, what do? You set Y equal to 0. And to find the Y intercept, you set X equal to 0, right? Okay, so let's actually do this. Let's take that Y value of 0 and put it right in there. And it's going to say 2X minus 3 times 0 equals 6. So anything times 0 disappears. So you could just cancel this out, and you really have the equation 2X equals 6. And when you divide both sides by 2, you'll get your answer X equals 3, and that is the X-intercept value. Okay. Now the Y-intercept value, you're going to set X equal to 0, so it's going to be 2 times 0 minus 3Y equals 6. And of course, 2 times 0 is 0. You can just scratch that out, and you really have the equation negative 3Y equals 6. We'd have to divide both sides by negative 3, and you get Y equals negative 2. That's your Y-intercept value. Y equals negative 2. Now, let's talk about how the multiple choice answer on this type of question is going to be on the test. Okay, so you have to first identify which one works. This one's it. They want you to rewrite it and then state the X and Y intercepts. So rewrite it in standard form. So your answer, here's your standard form equation. Your answer is going to be something like this, like, okay, multiple choice answer A. It's going to be 2X minus 3Y equals 6. And then it's going to have a colon. And then it's going to have X. And I don't know why they didn't put X int, or they didn't write out X intercept. They just put X with the colon. You'd have your answer 3 right there. And then another Y intercept negative 2. So this is how your multiple choice answer on the test is going to look like. Okay? So I hope we understand. You first say which one's linear. This one was the only linear one. And you rewrote it in standard form, X's and Y's on the left side. And then you have your X-intercept and Y-intercept all together. So the test is Friday. These are only some of the questions. A lot of the questions will be on the slope formula. And definitely a lot of questions are going to be on graphing with Y equals mx plus b. So here we go. I'm done.